Hey folks, this is Pojo, and we're here for the quarterfinal round against KampfKrote. We are in the top four now. Whoever wins this gets to move up to yet another round, and then I believe there's another round after that. But yeah, in any case, it's a little bit of like weird losers bracket, winners bracket type thing going on. But in any case, we are in the top four at the moment. This one is going to determine pretty much who gets third place. And KampfKrote is playing a red and purple deck that has 3 plagues in the main board, which really worries us. In addition to the 3 plagues, there's also 3 suffocates, 4 torches, and along all of that stuff, there's also some life gain, there's statuary maidens. Like, there's a lot of stuff here that's really specifically bad for our aggro archetype. And we're not looking forward to this matchup overall. We get to start it off with Grenade and Drone, which is nice. We have a pretty decent opening hand. Initiative of the Sands is a reasonable play. We wanted to play the red one first to draw that Vara's Favor out, because we knew it would be coming at some point, and we wanted to get rid of it as fast as we could. We play the Diplomatic Seal here to get the time, because we need double time for Temple Scribe. And Suffocate here does, of course, end our Initiate run, but overall this isn't looking too bad. We get to play Temple Scribe out. The Suffocates, the single target removal is not as scary as the Plagues and the Lightning Storms, so we're kind of glad that we haven't seen those yet, but we're also, you know, a little bit trepidatious. We really don't want to get stuck in a situation where our board's completely clear and we don't have Vault of the Praxis to back us up. So we need to get Xenon Obelisk down, and we need to get into a situation where we're not completely wrecked. Statuary Maiden is another really bad card for the tokens matchup for obvious reasons. It's one of those cards like the previous one that we dealt with, which is Scrap Tank, where it actively punishes playing a aggressive board, and we play a very aggressive board, so this isn't super great for us. I may have pretty strongly signaled that I have a torch there, but overall, that attack wouldn't have been too terrible. In the end, I decided that I wanted something that would give me a better chance of actually drawing into some power, and now we have Xenon Obelisk, so we're going to develop it. Pretty sure. Yeah. Amber Acolyte's pretty solid here, but it's not as good as just playing out the Xenon Obelisk, since it gives us the extra toughness. I have the torch here to deal with Statuary Maiden if I feel like it, but I decide not to attack again. I don't really need to sacrifice my tokens here, so I decide that instead it would be better to try and save my attacks for larger threats, such as that Infernal Tyrant, which is certainly a scary card. Alright, 6 and 7 gets us up to Claw of the First Dragon, and it also means that we have a better chance of killing Infernal Tyrant in one go. So if he attacks us here, we actually get to block with our 3-2, and we get to Torch. And that looks pretty good for us. That's a pretty good way for us to wipe out this board. Infernal Tyrant's a scary threat if it's left unchecked, and especially if it gets a bunch of weapons, since once again we don't run a lot of heavy removal here. Alright, the upgrade here gets us into a very good position, where Xenon Obelisk has us positioned just really well. All of our tokens are pretty nasty. They're not as vulnerable to Plague as they used to be. I choose to attack in here because I really want to get Infernal Tyrant out of the way, and I also want to like trade off some of these tokens and get the board a little bit clearer before I use Claw of the First Dragon. Especially since there are multiple ways in which wipes could happen to me that are pretty bad for me. An Argenport Instigator is going to create problems if I play too much stuff into a wipe. Plus, this aggressive play actually gets me a little bit of damage in. Not enough, because Infernal Tyrant just soaks it right back up. But that was always going to happen. We were never going to get away from Infernal Tyrant without taking at least 6 health of health stolen. Claw of the First Dragon is great here in particular, and this is part of the reason why we held it. We didn't have a good target for it previously. The Champions of Chaos are very bad against, are very good against tokens, and obviously we wanted more ways to deal with those. So we attack in for 6 here. That gives us a lot of pressure. Assembly line's looking pretty good, and once we hit 8 again, we'll have that extra Xenon bonus again, which is really nice. Statuary Maiden puts a bit of a slower setup on our roll, but at this point, if my opponent goes deep, we should be able to go wide. So we're not too worried about that stack up of extra units. An attack here is pretty justifiable, but could also hurt us a little bit more than it helps us, so we decide to hold out for one more turn, even though I think this is pretty fine either way. So KampfKrote decides not to play anything here, and I break my audio. Hold on a sec. I attack in is what I was going to say. There's a Death Strike response, but this is definitely lethal, or very, very close to it. No, yeah, it's definitely lethal. Hello, welcome back. In the space of that last second, there was like a, 2 or 3 hour break. But we have it all together now, and I believe that this is the victory blow. We're pretty close. Yeah. So none of those cudgels get given because KampfKrote is definitely dead. Okay, so this is really good for me because obviously the deck has a very strong main board against me, so I need to get the first game. I need to get a victory in the first game so that I can sneak anything out from under him in the later games, because now he's going to be siding against me and the board's just going to get even worse against my particular deck. What I end up going for here is 4 Volts of the Praxis, or at least appears to be what I'm considering. I don't remember for sure if this is what I go for. But the idea behind it is that since we're going to be playing into so much removal, we want to go for a slower and more draw-oriented game, where all of that removal doesn't really slow us down because we're playing Volts of the Praxis and we're getting extra draws, and therefore we can hold the fort down and actually basically hold our own here. The question of how we make space there is a little bit of a tricky one. We definitely have to take out Infinite Hourglass. Infinite Hourglass is the card that we include to make all of our aggro stuff faster, and also to do some better stuff with just disabling permafrosts. It's a really fun one of include that just doesn't really matter here. Cards like Finest Hour and Torture are fairly relevant since they allow us to get over rather large units and kill stuff like that 6/6, and any way to kill the 6/6 is pretty important if I'm going to be stalling out as much as I plan to be stalling out. So I really have to watch where it is that I want to make space. This is going to take a second to decide. I believe we eventually decide to cut a Temple Scribe. So let's just cut to that part. Okay, so for the second game of the set, let's take a look at our opening hand. This obviously doesn't work since it's only got 1 power. The Vault of the Praxis is nice, but nothing else about it is keepable. We end up with only 2 colors, but the Initiate into Assembly Line is kind of cute, and if we can actually get Amber Acolyte on 2, then that's a pretty good way to set up our green. I really like having the Assembly Lines here, and the Amber Acolyte's, of course, a very, very strong card as well. Initiate gets torched almost immediately. That's fine. We can live with that. And KampfKrote pulls out an Argenport Instigator, which is a really rough card in this matchup since it punishes killing tokens quite hard. It makes Champions of Chaos extremely hard to block. It means that he gets to push a lot of extra damage through. There are Umbran Reapers in his deck. There's a lot of other ways that he can deal damage to me, so I have to be very careful about how I block and what I choose to block with. Amber Acolyte here is the right card, but so is Assembly Line, really. If we want to win this, we might actually have to just go for the Overwhelm. We can get a super powerful rally. Yeah, that's definitely the reasoning here. If we can get a super powerful rally early on while he's still setting up, there's a pretty good chance that we can win this, provided we don't get plagued. And so, this is the problem that we were definitely afraid of. We didn't really want to get hit by all of that exceptional removal this early. We really need to have some form of protection for our units, but there's just not that much there this early on. Sabotage hits and pulls the rally out of my hand, which is pretty crushing. At this point, we don't have a lot of good options. I can choose to block Argenport Instigator. I'll take as much damage as though I hadn't blocked it, but it is a possible way to deal. Stand Together is a pretty good piece of news, provided I don't get sabotaged again. Since Instigator's attacking in, that means we get to crack back. But overall, this is still looking pretty rough. A Statuary Maiden here or anything like that is going to hurt very badly. If he plays really anything at this point, I'm in a lot of trouble. He managed to cut a substantial portion of stuff out of my hand, and he's already taken my board out, so I'm not in great shape. We do get the Annihilate out by attacking in here, which is very useful because it means that we get to stand together in response. That gives us a sizable amount of stuff on the board, and Stand Together, of course, is just a really powerful spell in this matchup. It's one of the most important spells that I can get. But unfortunately, Infernal Tyrant is a card that I really don't want to see right now. I still don't have Xenon, I don't have Rally, I don't have Torch, so I don't have a way to trade with this Infernal Tyrant in a meaningful fashion. Marison's Disciple's super helpful, and fortunately he doesn't attack me with the Tyrant. I think that attacking with the Tyrant would have been a solid play. I have to play out the Deadly unit here to block the Tyrant, but of course that's vulnerable to Vara's favor, it's vulnerable to Torches. At some point the Deadly unit is going to weigh. I'm only stalling for time here. Great Parliament at 8 would be ideal. If I can get 2 Owls, then I can stall out a little bit better. Unfortunately, I'm again being pressed pretty hard. Steward of the Past is 3 damage, which may be worth taking, or it may be worth blocking. There's a question either way. I think that in general, since my overall plan just has to involve running him over, we have to sort of stick with what we got. Parliament is really, really tempting here. It might actually be a card that can save me. It allows me to block more efficiently into the Tyrant. It basically just lets me play a couple of things that would otherwise be pretty good, prevent lethal in some ways that are fairly helpful. And of course we have to deal with this now, so we block it with a 2/2 and we torch it. Okay, so Krote's got the Stone Cudgel now. I've still got the Deadly unit, and that's fairly useful because it means that even if he puts the Cudgel on something, I have a way to defend myself. So that 8 health is not going to necessarily put me out too much. I still need the power for Great Parliament, and I just don't have it yet. Rally might be a useful defensive play. I finally decide to go and take the Great Parliament out since I'm pretty close to dead at this point if he draws into anything. I did end up drawing the seat off of the Vault of the Praxis, so we do get an extra card out of it, if not an extra flyer. Unfortunately, Vara's favor does come down, and now I'm in a situation where I'm facing lethal unless I give him a very good block. So we choose to chump block here. I guess I'm considering it at the moment. There are some ways in which a more profitable block might be to block with less units. I really have to protect my life total at this point. I'm pretty low, and I don't have anything by way of health gain. The Lumen Defenders might have been a decent idea here in the sideboard, but it's hard to say, given the strength of his removal spells. Overall, this doesn't look like a situation that I can easily win. So we have to think about it a little bit. So the main problem with multi-blocking here is that these 2/2s have Aegis, and that makes them quite a bit more valuable since they're actually not vulnerable to plagues or lightning storms. They're not things that I'd really be willing to throw away super easily. And I'm still banking on the possibility of getting a rally victory, so we're pushing for that as much as possible. Another Cudgel comes down, and then another one, and now I have Stand Together here, which is a pretty solid deal. If I could get my hands on a Xenon Obelisk, I'd have something close to lethal. If I can continue to chump effectively, it would be especially helpful, but Argenport Instigator is making that somewhat difficult. Stand Together is a really useful card here since it increases my clock a little bit, but overall I'm not in a good situation either way. At some point, we're going to have to face one of these monsters. Alright, my opponent goes all in, which is probably what he should have been doing for a while now, since I've been down on cards for a bit. Argenport Instigator's a decent block. We need to get rid of it eventually, or else we're going to die. Rally defensively seems like the right play here, since the extra attack damage is going to allow me to clear the board a little bit better. And in fact, this leads to a perfect board clear where I still keep my flyer. So if my opponent is in top deck mode, if he doesn't have any units here, then we have a path to victory that takes us a couple of turns, but overall takes advantage of that downed board. I just have to not see any sort of unit that's really going to crush me, and I have to myself play enough chump blockers to get around that. But without Argentport Instigator, I'm no longer taking damage just for getting hit. So this looks pretty good until the Champion of Cunning comes down. With Deadly and Overwhelm, the Champion of Cunning is a death sentence. I don't have a removal spell for it, and there's no way to proactively block a Champion of Cunning with that many Stone Cudgels on it. Even if I had removal, it would probably be in the form of a Scorpion Wasp or something like that, and we don't even run them in the deck. So yeah, that's 13 damage that we can't deal with, and we are out. There's one more game, and the sideboard is going to change up a little bit here. Okay, now the triple vault, quadruple vault thing seemed like a good idea at the time, but the more that I played with it, the more I was convinced that it wasn't necessarily the right path, because the thing about his deck is that it puts me on a clock. I cannot continue to chump block against Champion of Chaos and Argentport Soldier and Statuary Maiden. That kind of situation just eventually snowballs out of control. It has a certain inevitability against tokens that can't really be beat. So if I just sit here and draw cards with Praxis Praxis, I will eventually lose. So I'm opting for a more Aegis-focused strategy, trying to get some units down on the board that are actually going to stick. And we're going to go really heavy into the aggro and try to win the game as quickly as possible, like we did in Game 1. So to that extent, we cut out the Praxises entirely, and we start looking at whether or not we want to have even one of them in the deck. Assembly Line's definitely a keepable card. Everything in this looks fairly okay, so we're going to see how this goes. Sideboarding takes a while here, so we cut it all out. We put in Claw of the First Dragon as a possible way to finish off in the end game, but for the most part we're relying on those Aegis units and trying to get those across. Unfortunately, I don't have power here, so I can't actually play with that particular card in my opening hand, and this hand doesn't look particularly good. We've got Rakano, power, and no time. I've been a little worried about this power base for a while, so it sucks to actually get hit in a place where we're not actually getting the power that we need. Here we got the Time Sigil, and that doesn't allow us to play Temple Scribes, but it does allow us to play Marison's Disciple on 4 or Kapahar Elite on 4 if I get my 4th power. Drawing a power here, looking pretty good. If I don't get the 4th power, then I'm going to get crushed by the early aggression from KampfKrote. And Krote plays a Stonescar Banner into a Champion of Chaos. On-curve Champion of Chaoses are one of the scariest things in Stonescar mid-range decks. If you can get an on-curve Champion of Chaos, then it's usually a really difficult time for your opponent, unless he's running a deck that runs Vanquishes. Since they're such a ridiculous card, it's really tough to beat them. And since we don't have that many tools for dealing with Champion, this ends up being kind of a nightmare. Following it up with an Argentport Instigator means that I have to do some stuff. I make a rookie mistake here and don't block before I use Finest Hour, so when he torches it, I still take like an extra 3 damage. But overall, this game is already over. I'm not in a good position. I'm taking way too much damage. I can chump block here to maybe prolong my life for one more turn, provided I play Copperhall Elite, but this looks like it's the end. So, you know, we got power screwed pretty hard here, but also just didn't run enough cards in the sideboard against this particular type of deck, and feel a little bad about that. But that is the end, and we placed 4th in the November Invitational, which is just short of the cash prizes. Darn. I'm not actually too worried. It was like $5. But yeah, in any case, thank you guys so much for watching. Feel free to like or subscribe, and let me know how I did with this. This was an attempt to make the best out of some, you know, sort of empty footage. So if it went well, just let me know. All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks for watching. See you next time.